Let's take a little ride into history across the bottom deck of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge via the Key System electric train. We'll start out our trip on Upper Market Street. We can have the choice of either the Municipal Railway or the Market Street Railway and head towards downtown. Note the 4 tracks heading down Market Street. Here the streetcar crosses Church, heading towards DuBois, and down the First and Market, where the car turns and heads towards Mission Street. Note the yellow signal. These were called birdcage signals, unique to San Francisco. At First and Mission, we get our glimpse of the East Bay Terminal. The East Bay Terminal was constructed, and the first train started running through it in January 16th, 1939. Here comes a Key System train pulling into the terminal. The Key System trains ran on 600 volts and used a third rail. The overhead catenary was used by the Southern Pacific trains and the Sacramento Northern. They ran on 1200 volts DC. Here's a map showing where the Key System trains ran. Starting out in San Francisco, going towards Yerba Buena Island, the A train went to 12th Street in Oakland, the B to Underhills, the C to Piedmont, the E to Claremont, and the F line to Berkeley. If you were lucky enough to be the first on the train, you could get the front seat and have the best view of the railroad. Here we start out our trip. The terminal had 6 tracks. As we head up towards the bottom deck of the bridge, all 6 tracks converged into 2. Here we switch over to the eastbound track. And we get a glimpse of the terminal substation. Now we're on the bottom deck of the Bay Bridge. It was a nice view from the train, unobstructed, without a big barrier. You could watch the Southern Pacific ferry boats plying back and forth across the bay. The Southern Pacific one time operated the largest ferry fleet in the world. And if you had the opportunity to get on a ferry boat, it was a great place to film the trains running on the bottom deck. Interesting to note that the ferry boats outlasted the Bay Bridge trains by several months. Here our train heads down towards Yerba Buena Island. Dipping into the tunnel and out the other side, there was the platform for Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island. At one time, the fare was 15 cents to go to Yerba Buena Island. To go on to Berkeley, it cost you 50 cents. Here's the train starting out its trip across the cantilever section of the Bay Bridge. As we travel on, taken in 1940 was Addison Lapson's pictures of all the Key System boats tied up after the exposition. Note all the covers on the stacks. They were all out of service at this point. Here we head off the bridge into Yerba Buena Yard. On the left is the old pier substation. The trains here ran on third rail. As they continued on, the pantograph automatically went up and they ran on the overhead wires from this point into Oakland. Here we go under the Army base overpass. Heading towards Oakland, we dive under the SP tracks through the subway. From inside the train, heading eastbound, coming up from under the Southern Pacific underpass. Here we are at Tower 2, heading out on the A and B lines. Note on the right is the old Key System main powerhouse. Here we turn off to the right on Louise Street, next to Tower 2 here, on our A train. As we follow along Louise Street a couple of blocks, we turn on to Poplar Street. Poplar Street was so rough, the track was so rough, the locals used to say, swing and sway on the Key System way. And from Poplar Street, we turn on to 12th Street to downtown Oakland. Note City Hall in the background. Here we are on the A train coming down 12th Street, heading east. Here's a picture of the Key System train taking the crossover and heading back towards San Francisco. Here we are in the center of downtown Oakland. In later years, this became the official end of the line after the dam at the end of Lake Merritt was rebuilt. The car heads back towards San Francisco with the county courthouse in the background. Heading westbound, you note the Tribune Tower in the background. This is now heading out 12th Street and around the edge of Lake Merritt. The courthouse again in the background and skirting the edge of Lake Merritt. Here's the same view from inside the car. This is going out along East 14th. Heading down the 9th Avenue crossing. And continuing east down the Big Dip to 14th Avenue. Still heading east on East 14th, note the Montgomery Ward building on the right. Also, the new Fruitvale Theater. Here the train turns onto 46th Avenue along the old interurban electric right-of-way. Onto Bancroft here, and along Bancroft to Havens Court, where the terminal was. Note the two-unit train running through the streets. They were over 220 feet long, and how well they blended in with the traffic. At one time, the terminal was at Dutton Avenue, went much farther east. Here's the train heading to the crossover at Havens Court. This became the end of the line for the Key System. The train now heads back towards San Francisco. The original Southern Pacific tracks had a lot of private right-of-way and street running. One block would be street running, the other block would be private right-of-way. Here we are in the front of the train, riding in and out of the private right-of-way, in between the buildings and houses, heading along Bancroft towards East 14th Street. Here we are along East 14th Street again. Today, if you travel along this street, you'll notice many familiar stores and shop buildings. Once again, the train crosses the 14th Avenue dip. Here's the train crossing 9th Avenue. At this part here, over to the left, would be the Central Car House here, which is now a shopping plaza. Here the train zigzags from 14th Street to 12th Street. Here's the county courthouse. And the Tribune Tower again on the right. And the train heading back on the main line towards San Francisco. Here we have two Shipyard Railway cars on an excursion train coming out of the old Key Systems shops in Emeryville. The cars were originally built in 1886 for the New York Elevated in New York, and later came out during the war to haul shipyard workers between Richmond and Oakland. The Railway and Locomotive Historical Society painted the cars yellow for the excursion train. These cars were later donated to the Western Railroad Museum in Solano County, California. There's a shot of the New York cars coming up on the old shop lead in West Oakland. This is a shot on Adeline Street. This was the only excursion the cars were ever used in Oakland. Onward as we go up here, we get to 40th and San Pablo. Here's the E train, taking off to the left at Tower 3 at Linden Street. From Linden Street, it went to 55th Street, and then along up Claremont Avenue. Along Claremont Avenue was a straight shot right to the Claremont Hotel that Borax Smith built. Borax Smith was the founder of the Key System. With the nice homes on either side, heading up towards to the Claremont Hotel. As the train heads up to the Claremont Hotel, it ended up right in the middle of two tennis courts, and that was the end of the line. From here, let's jump over to the F line. Here we are on the F line, heading up Adeline toward Shattuck. Note the Beacon's Van and Storage Building on the right, still there today. This is along Shattuck Avenue at University. Note the Southern Pacific ticket office. Here's the southbound train. Here's the train heading from the old Key System tracks onto the IER, Southern Pacific Line. The train started running over the IER tracks about 1941. It's interesting to note that these modern Key System trains, built around 1936 and 37, were built out of older cars that were scrapped and originally ran from 1912 and 1913, with the same motors and trucks, but new bodies. Crossing University Avenue, here's the train turning from Shattuck onto Shattuck Place. And on to Henry Street. Here's the train heading from Henry on to Sutter. Along Sutter Street to the North Bray Tunnel. At the other end of the tunnel was the end of the line for the F line. Here's a rare shot of the 1201, the line car built by the Carter Brothers Car Company in 1895, and it was made into a line car in 1915. It's a very rare shot. Here the train departs the terminal at Thousand Oak. Here's the F train from the end of the line, heading back towards San Francisco, coming out of the North Bray Tunnel to Sutter Street. The North Bray Tunnel today is used for auto traffic. From Henry, turning onto Shattuck Place. And along Shattuck Place. Along Shattuck Avenue, going towards University Avenue. You might note the heavy construction that the Southern Pacific used in their catenary. It was very heavy duty. After crossing University Avenue, the trains pulled to the side of the buildings. Note the United Artists Theater and the Shattuck Hotel as a 2-unit train heads towards San Francisco. Here the Key System train is heading down Shattuck Avenue towards Adeline Street. These shots were taken late in the day. Along Adeline Street at one time had 6 tracks on it. There were 2 local streetcar tracks, the Southern Pacific IER tracks, and the 2 Key System tracks. Along 40th Street, the C line, heading towards Piedmont. Towards the end of the line, the C line ran through many backyards. And these films were filmed on the last day of operation. It was April 20th, 1958. Here the conductor waves his last farewell as he departs for his final trip to San Francisco. Here's a picture of the train running through the 40th Street cut. This cut today is completely gone, completely filled in. And the Piedmont main station on Piedmont Avenue, where at one time shuttle cars used to take off from this point and head to the end of the line. Many of the crossings were protected by automatic signals. Back at 40th and San Pablo, the flagman would wave and stop traffic for the train to come by. This was the junction for the E and the F lines also. The switchman in his tower at night could tell by the lights on the top of the middle of the door which trains were going in which direction, and he never needed to know or to read the sign on the front of the car. Just by looking at the lights, he could tell which way to switch the switches. Here comes an F train from Berkeley heading towards San Francisco. Here's a B train leaving Wesley Avenue. Here comes the B train on Lakeshore Avenue. Here's a shot on Grand Avenue across from Lake Merritt. The next stop would be Grand and Broadway. Back at 40th and San Pablo, we head back towards the bottom deck of the Bay Bridge, dipping under the subway here. This subway was below sea level, and on a stormy night or a high tide, they had big pumps to pump the water out of the subway and keep it dry. Here the train heads up towards the toll plaza area. This area here was for where the cars were stored. They also had a run-through shop here where the cars had light maintenance done to them. Here are 3 and 4 units being assembled for the rush hour. Note the automobiles paying their tolls in the eastbound direction. Each unit consisted of 2 cars, so a 4-car train would have 8 cars in it. At this point, we would leave the overhead catenary and pick up the 3rd rail shoes, heading back towards the bridge. Here we are heading up the bridge, and if you note, on the bridge there were 2 lanes for trains and 3 lanes for trucks and buses. The trains had a very sophisticated automatic train control system. The speed limit across the bridge was 35 miles an hour. If the train were to go any faster than 35, a bell would signal in the cab, and the motorman would have to respond by applying the brakes. If he failed to do so, the train would automatically come to a stop. Here we head toward Yerba Buena Island with a whole platform of sailors waiting to get to San Francisco. After proceeding through the Yerba Buena Tunnel, we are once again on the main suspension bridge, heading toward San Francisco. Interesting to note that in the 19-year history of the Bay Bridge trains, there was never one fatal accident on the bridge itself. Here was a good shot of a Southern Pacific ferry coming from the Oakland Mole to San Francisco. At this point in time, the ferry boats were just used to haul mainline passengers from Oakland to San Francisco and San Francisco to Oakland. It was a great view to look down upon the Embarcadero from one of the Key System trains. Here's a shot of a 2-unit train heading for the terminal, and another 2-unit train leaving for Oakland. Here the train switches to the terminal approach tracks. This view from Folsom Street showing a 3-unit train making the last large curve into the terminal. As we switch through the maze of switches to end up on the correct platform track inside the terminal. Here's our train, heading into the terminal. At one time, there were 3 railroads operating on the Bay Bridge: the Sacramento Northern, the Southern Pacific, and the Key System. Back in 1940, Addis and Laughlin caught a few shots of the Southern Pacific Red trains coming in. These trains were all abandoned in 1941. Here's a picture of the Sacramento Northern interurban entering the terminal. The Sacramento Northern at one time was the longest interurban in the United States. You could board at San Francisco, head across towards Oakland, and go on through Walnut Creek, Concord to Pittsburgh. And at Pittsburgh, the whole train went on a ferry boat and crossed the Carquinez Straits. Across the other side, the train again would proceed on up to Sacramento. At Sacramento, you could take a train to Woodland, or you could continue on to Marysville, Yuba City, to Colusa, or all the way to Chico. And a final look, a 3-unit train leaving, heading back towards Oakland. If you would like, today you can still take a ride on one of the Key System bridge trains at the Western Railroad Museum. The Western Railroad Museum is located 10 miles east of Fairfield on Highway 12. The museum boasts a collection of over 110 pieces of equipment, many from the Key System, the Sacramento Northern, San Francisco Municipal Railway, and it operates every weekend of the year. Here's a shot of the Key System Bay Bridge train 182 pulling out of the large car house for a run around the museum's trackage. Here the train passes the park, where picnic facilities are available. On up to the ticket office, where most of the passengers usually get on. On certain weekends throughout the year, we operate special steam and diesel trains on a 14-mile round trip, which we operate on part of the Sacramento Northern's main line. The museum has all been built by volunteers. They restore the equipment, build the track, and put up the overhead lines. And you too could learn to operate the equipment. Today, there are only 4 of these Key System bridge trains left. 3 at the Western Railroad Museum, and 1 located at the Orange Empire Railway Museum at Paris, California. Here's the train heading south past South Park Junction. On our right are many of the museum's pieces of equipment being stored on the Sacramento Northern's main line. Here's one of our volunteer motormen. And here we come towards the end of the line. From here, the train returns to the car house. We hope you enjoyed your trip across the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge on a key system train, and hope that you come up and take a ride on the real one. Our operating hours are every Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 5, and we're open most holidays. And we're looking forward to seeing you up at Rio Vista Junction.